All right, I'm so excited to have everyone on this call. This is my spring presentation that I gave at a few state conventions, and I put a lot of time into it. So I wanted to give this presentation to the internet. I am recording this, so the recording will be available if it works. Because technology does sometimes fail us. So I called this presentation, What's Going On? Oops, getting a little ahead of myself. I called this presentation, What's Going On? And first, let me just introduce myself really quick. My name is Jess Mears. I am a longtime libertarian activist. I absolutely love all of the principles that the Libertarian Party stands for. I found the Libertarian Party when I was a high school student and decided that this was going to be my political home. And then I decided to get involved when I got to my college campus my freshman year and saw college Democrats, college Republicans, but I did not see Libertarians represented. So I found out then and there that Libertarians needed some leadership. They needed some people to organize on their behalf. I tried to get a hold of my state party, and my state party didn't really have much organization in the city of Cincinnati, which is a very big city. That was in 2007. So since that time, I've been an organizer from all the way from the county level, the university level. I founded a group at the Villages. The Villages is the universe's largest retirement community. I organized a group back in 2010 in the Villages. I am now working for the National Party. Right now I'm at our national headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. And I have to say that I absolutely love being able to do what I do. Because I am working for the National Party, I get to spend a lot of time learning about politics, learning about what the Libertarian Party is doing. And I feel like I have some information that I want to make available to you, because I think all of what we're going to go over is incredibly useful knowledge. If you know something that I don't, please contribute to the conversation, put it in the chat. I would like to hear from you during this. This presentation was built to be very interactive. It's got a lot of Q&A. But I've been giving it in person. So this is going to be a digital representation of this in-person presentation. So please interact in the chat. And if you find that I may have misstated something, let me know, because I am trying to record this for future use. And if you think there's something that I'm sharing that's incorrect, I would love for you to let me know. I have sources available for all of the information we're going to go over, but there's always that possibility that maybe my source was incorrect. So please be cognizant of that while we are paying attention. So this is called What's Going On. I'm trying to get us ready for 2020, because 2020 is going to be here before we know it. We're already in full swing of things with the Democrats and Republicans. What's going on with Libertarians? We're going to look at what happened in 2016, 2018, and that's going to help us get ready for 2020. Now, I do want to say I come with a warning label. I mentioned I work for the National Party, but that does not mean that my opinions that we're going to go over are reflective of the National Party. Perhaps I might say something that, is maybe not the most best reflective of some of our candidates in the past. That's because these are my personal opinions that I've developed on my own. This presentation does not reflect the opinions of any of my current employers or past employers. So please keep that in mind as we're moving along. I am a person that is entitled to have my own opinions, as everyone should be able to. So now that that's said, 2018, November 6th, it was a really rough night for Libertarians. Think about where you were. Were you involved with the Libertarian Party in 2018 on November 6th? That was our election night. What kind of mood was there in your home or your election night party where you were? I'm going to gather that you were probably disappointed. Well, I'm going to give you some information to reflect on why we were where we were on 2018. I hope you're going to have some laughs. I hope you're going to learn something new. I hope you're going to contribute to the discussion. I want to learn how we can move forward. So moving forward means we also have to take a look back in time. We're going to step briefly back to history, to where George Washington, upon his farewell address in 1796, first president of the United States, said, However, political parties may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. George Washington gave us this advice on his farewell address day because he was concerned about political parties and what that would do to the beautiful brand new country that we have just reclaimed for ourselves not too long after the American Revolution. And not very long after George Washington left office, political parties started to form. So you can see it was around 1820 to 1824, political parties started forming in America. This is the timeline. You can see parties have came, parties have left, they have died, but since 1852, America has been primarily a two-party system with two dominant parties. You can guess it is the Democrats and the Republicans. Why has it been a two-party system since 1852? This is usually a question where if we were having a presentation in person, I would give a gift to whoever got the question right. But the answer is because ballot access started to be implemented. Okay, so right now we are seeing a decline in independent people that are registering with the Democrats and Republicans. They've actually been, over the past few decades, leaving the two-party system in droves. Independent voters do often vote with political parties. Larry Sabato of the University of Virginia Center for Politics says, being an independent is just a popular cover label for hidden partisans who are quite loyal to their hidden party. Do you agree or disagree? Think about that one. In 9 states, independent voters have a plurality over Democrats and Republicans. So you can see, for example, there, Colorado, the light blue state, it has a plurality of independent voters. So that's 9 whole states in total that have a plurality. That's something very interesting that I wanted to make sure that I could share with you, because I don't think a lot of people know that if you live in a state that has a one-party dominating party. I wanted to go over these voter registration numbers. So there are over 200 million registered voters in America, and the voter registration numbers that you see right here only reflect the 31 states plus DC that allow for partisan registration. Now, when I share this information with individuals, I ask, what do you think of it? Because one thing that sticks out strongly to me is that the Democratic voters have a huge majority in registered voters. And another thing I've heard is that a lot of libertarians are disappointed with our voter registration number, about a little less than 0.5%. So if you have some feedback to this, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll discuss it over the chat. So millennials right now are the largest voting bloc in America. In 2016, millennials cast 34 million ballots, and with every successive generation, generations are voting more and more and more millennial. Silent generation are about 25, or they're voting more and more independent. The silent generation has 27% independent voters. Baby boomers are at 32%. Gen X at 39%, millennials at 44%, and I'm sure when we get statistics on Gen Z, the next generation, they're coming out of college right now, those are going to be some very independent-leaning voters. So party registration, you can see it was declining rapidly from 2000 to 2016, but something happened in 2016 to cause the two-party system voter registration to kind of start to level off. I bet you can guess what that was. The 2016 election and the election of Donald Trump as president. You can see independent voters, that green line there, they have been increasing and increasing, but that has also leveled off. we're finding that Americans are starting to get very comfortable with their political parties and aren't going to budge. And this is a map that I think is very interesting to take a look at and to observe. The light blue color is two-party dominant countries. And when I saw this, to me, I thought that there would be more countries in the world that have a two-party system. But I was very surprised to see so many dark blue countries that have a multi-party system. And in the Libertarian Party, that's really what we're trying to do. We're either trying to knock out one of the major parties and create a two-party system with the Libertarians being a major party, or provide more room and opportunity for more voices and have a multi-party system in America. I think personally a multi-system would be much better for America than having a two-party rule. And we talked a little bit ago about why we've had a two-party system since 1852. That's because ballot access laws started to become implemented. The reason why we have ballot access laws is because they were racially motivated, is one reason. Another reason is because to stop the communists. And we didn't start seeing ballot access laws until the early 1900s. And one person that has a lot of information, two people, Ken Melman in Kentucky and Richard Winger of California. These are two gentlemen that have a lot of knowledge about ballot access. And I highly encourage you to learn more about ballot access in America, because that is what is the number one thing that's struggling for the Libertarian Party, is us trying to achieve ballot access. We're going to get more into ballot access as we continue. All right, so libertarian. The word libertarian, when did it actually come into existence? The first time it's recorded being used was in 1913 in a book by Charles Spalding called Liberty and the Great Libertarians. It was influenced by John Locke, Thomas Paine. H.L. Mencken described himself as a libertarian in 1923. And then in the 1950s, the word libertarian became a replacement word for the word liberal. The records show that it's a synonym for what liberal once meant. All right, so let's move on to the Libertarian Party's founding. In 1971, the Libertarian Party was founded. I have Richard Nixon here in my presentation. Can you guess why Richard Nixon has something to do with the founding of the Libertarian Party? If you thought about the gold standard or wage and price controls, you got the answer correct. Richard Nixon announced the public implementation of wage and price controls, which basically removed the gold standard and allowed the government to impose inflation easier. So a group of individuals decided enough was enough, and they founded the Libertarian Party to create a new political party in America devoted to defending liberty and restricting government to protect the rights of its citizens. The party was founded in Colorado Springs. And the party founding in 1971 is likely what brought all of us here together on this presentation this evening. So when we're in a room and I'm with libertarians, I ask, what do we all have in common? And everyone looks around at each other, and maybe a few people will say a few things like, we're classical liberals, or we're for free markets. But there's a few things people don't want to say, and those are the obvious: race and gender. When we look around the room at Libertarian Party events, state conventions, typically there's a primarily a large percentage of the individuals are of a similar race, a similar gender, and a similar age range. Libertarians ask this question all the time. Why aren't there more women in the Libertarian Party? Why aren't there more minorities showing up to Libertarian events? So I've thought about that. I've been in the Libertarian Party for a decade, racked my brain, and then I started studying history a little bit, refreshing myself from what I forgot in high school or was never educated on. And I did a little bit of thinking about it, and I think I kind of figured out the reason why. And when you put it in a historical perspective, I think this all starts to make sense. Women's suffrage marches in the early 1910s. Women wanted and had the audacity to want to vote just like men. Well, back then, women took to the streets, the suffragettes, demanding that they get the right to vote. And back then, the Libertarian Party wasn't around yet. I bet you libertarians would have said women should deserve the right to vote. The civil rights movement was started in 1955 when Rosa Parks said, "I'm not sitting in the back of that bus," and she was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama. Back then, the Libertarian Party wasn't around, but I bet you libertarians would have said Rosa Parks should be able to sit wherever she would like on the bus. Martin Luther King Jr., he said, "I have a dream," this speech. It was given at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. 200,000 people of all colors came to this historic rally. Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Peter, Paul, and Mary, they played at this rally. Back then, I bet you a lot of libertarians were in that crowd. The Libertarian Party wasn't around yet. And then Vietnam War protests started on college campuses in 1965 by peace activists. The largest peace activist anti-war rally was in 1967. 100,000 anti-war activists gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. I bet you there were libertarians that were there. The Libertarian Party was not around yet. And then on May 4th, 1970, 4 students were killed by members of the Ohio National Guard at Kent State University at a Vietnam War protest. This is just absolutely atrocious. The Libertarian Party was not around yet. So we can't change history, but I would assert that a political party based on the libertarian ideology had been formed 20 or 60 years earlier, we would have a lot more minorities and women in our party today. We want to win hearts and minds. That's what we're trying to do. But our founders started the party appealing to the minds, so we missed a lot of years of winning people's hearts. Maj Touré is a candidate for Philadelphia City Council right now. He is an African-American male. He spoke at an event that I was at, and when asked why there were not more minorities in the Libertarian Party, he said that because we have a perception that we are racist within urban communities. He says that's also the same for conservatives. We've got to figure out how to get past this, and I don't have the answers here, but I wanted to share that information with you because I thought that was something that made me really, really stop and reflect about what my political party and the people that are made up of it, or the people that come to our meetings and come to our conventions and such. So I think this is something we can spend a lot more time on. So let's move on now to some notable libertarians. Do you know who this man is? This is John Hospers. He was our first presidential candidate in 1972. He received a little over 3,500 votes for president. This woman here, Toni Nathan, she was John Hospers' vice presidential candidate. She was the first woman to ever receive an electoral vote for a female in 1972. There was a faithless elector that cast an electoral college vote for her for president. This gentleman here, and I'm not talking about our Vice President Mike Pence, the guy in the middle, that is Rupert Bonham. He has been a contestant on Survivor, and he ran for the Libertarian governor candidate in Indiana in 2012. My mom loved Rupert. We are very fortunate to have him as a member of our party. He did not win. He received about 4% of the vote and got about over 100,000 votes. All right, this guy here, y'all better know who he is. This is Governor Gary Johnson from New Mexico. Governor Johnson ran for president in 2012 as a libertarian, received 1.2 million votes, a little under 1%. 2016, 4.5 million votes. Hey, everyone, thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. Get the chat going. I'd love to have the conversation as we are moving along because we have a lot of information to cover. And then in 2018, he ran for U.S. Senate, received about 15.4% of the vote. All right, now this is where we're going to move forward into 2016. We're going to be talking about 2016 for a little while. This here is a scene from the Libertarian National Convention in Orlando, Florida. The bubbles above these gentlemen's heads, they ran for president as a Libertarian candidate. This was their final round, their vote percentage totals. Now we're going to go through when each of these gentlemen announced they were running for president. Darryl Perry, he announced sometime in 2006 he was going to run for president. Mark Allen Feldman, January of 2015 he announced. And in September of 2015, both Austin Peterson and John McAfee announced they were running for president. The last person to announce that made it to the debate stage, 2016, January, was Governor Gary Johnson. I'm sharing this information with you to let you know that the Libertarian Party is a different animal from the Democrats and Republicans. We have the porcupine as our mascot, obviously a different animal, but there's no correlation between when you announce and how well you perform as a candidate for the Libertarian Party. So that's something you just have to consider. It's very different from the two-party system and their presidential nominating process. On the bottom half of the ticket for vice president, two gentlemen that were in the final round were Governor Bill Weld and Larry Sharpe. Their final vote percentages are above their heads, and you can see it was a very, very close final ballot for the vice presidential ticket. So I did a little research in preparing for this presentation, and I ran across something that I found really unique and interesting that I couldn't believe I didn't find before. We just said that Gary Johnson announced in January of 2016 that he was running for president. And then I found this that was aired in the Boston Herald in print on February 29th of 2016. It said, "You know, if he settles down, yeah," said Weld, who was backing Ohio Gov. John Kasich in the GOP primary when asked on Boston Herald Radio whether he would support Trump in the fall. "But I also have a long relationship with Mrs. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, so I'd want to see how the campaign unfolds there," which is a way of saying how Donald Trump evolves as a candidate. So I put two and two together. January 2016, Gary had already publicly announced he was running for president. February 29th, 2016, Bill Weld said he was backing John Kasich. Well, we just said Bill Weld became our vice presidential candidate. This was publicly available information at the time of our convention, nominating convention in May of 2016. And what I'm saying here is that, and I want to choose my words carefully since I'm recording this, is that I think we could do a better job of vetting our candidates, of learning more information about them before we vote for them. 2 weeks before the Libertarian National Convention, of which I was a delegate at that time, I didn't know when I showed up a few days before the convention that Bill Weld was running for vice president. I didn't know Larry Sharpe was running for vice president. I didn't know because there was too much going on. I had to pack my bags to get to the convention. I was learning more about all of the presidential candidates. There's a lot going on when you're trying to get yourself ready to head to a national political party convention. So all I'm really trying to say here is I think we need to vet our candidates better. We need to, each and every delegate at our national convention, it's their responsibility to research the candidates and to know who they are voting for. And I'm not disparaging Governor Weld in any sense. I worked very closely with Governor Weld in 2016, and I think he's probably the smartest man I've ever met in my entire life. And I really have a lot of respect for him. But I just wanted to point out that this was information available, Googleable. Let's just Google a little bit more in 2020 and forevermore, because we really need to take our candidates seriously. So I hate to do this to you, but I got a video.
Massachusetts resident who knows something of your tenure in public life there. I'm on a different place ideologically from you in the number line, but I have a lot of respect for your career and for your thoughtfulness. And I think that you're a deep thinker and a clear thinker on these things. I have a lot of respect for you. I hope you don't mind me saying.
Let me button my coat. Something's coming.
I can't imagine that you wouldn't tell a person in North Carolina or Ohio to vote for Hillary Clinton if the choice they were making was between giving the Libertarian Party 5% or potentially electing Donald Trump? Because you guys don't have a chance against Donald Trump and she does. And if they vote for you, they would be helping to elect Donald Trump. The Libertarian Party hasn't treated you great if they're putting out statements that you disagree with over your own name. Even now, this one week before the election, I can't imagine that your loyalty to them is stronger than your fear of Trump as a president.
Well, I'm here vouching for Mrs. Clinton, and I think it's high time somebody did, and I'm doing it based on my personal experience with her, and I think she's deserves to have people vouch for her other than members of the Democratic National Committee, so I'm here to do that.
You've had a fascinating career, and I really appreciate your time coming and talking to me about this tonight. Good luck, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Governor Bill Wells, the vice presidential nominee of the Libertarian ticket. That was the most interesting political conversation I've had about this election in months. Thank you.
So after that video had aired, I received a lot of text messages, a lot of calls. Many people were upset. And that's why I brought up the Boston Herald clip from that article before, because so many people were upset by the actions of our vice presidential candidate a week before the election. And so this all goes back to vetting. And that's all I'll say about that. So Governor Weld vouched for Hillary Clinton, and that vouching, unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure how you want to look at it, it didn't help her, because this was the scene of her election night party in 2016. On November 7th, 2016, Donald Trump won the presidency, leaving many people, myself included, incredibly stunned. Hillary Clinton had her election night party in the Jacob Javits Center in Manhattan under what was a literal glass ceiling. So many people had thought that they were going to be electing the first female president. And despite an overwhelming number of polls in Hillary Clinton's favor, including on election day, Donald Trump swept the Electoral College. So how did this happen? How did Donald Trump become the president? Well, it started with him going down an escalator when he announced he was going to be running. And for many months, he was at 1% or so in the polls. But on election night, what ultimately happened when it comes down to the numbers, 78,000 votes approximately between Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. That overall was enough to give Donald Trump the Electoral College. When we say every vote counts, we mean it. 78,000 votes were what created Donald Trump the United States president. So maybe you might think that your vote doesn't count, but when you look at it from the whole perspective, you don't know how everybody else in the country is going to vote. And when it all comes together and we have a couple days to analyze the data, you find out where the votes counted the most. Your vote always counts. So he received the 46 electoral votes between Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Those narrow states created Donald Trump. Donald Trump's campaign was out fundraised substantially. I thought there was perhaps some elaborate hoax that maybe Donald Trump was running for president to throw the election to Hillary Clinton. So I watched a movie called Fahrenheit 11/9. It's a Michael Moore documentary. And Michael Moore had accurately predicted that Donald Trump was going to win. And his kind of thesis in this documentary was that politicians ignored working class Americans for decades. And here's the one thing that I think really kind of hits home about how did establishment politicians ignore regular middle class, lower middle class Americans. And here we go. We've got Barack Obama. It's actually Fahrenheit 11/9. There's a Fahrenheit 9/11, and this one's Fahrenheit 11/9. And if you get a chance to watch it, it's on Amazon Prime or Netflix, and it's pretty entertaining. So watch what Barack Obama does with this glass.
Generally I have not been doing stunts here, but, and this used a filter. The water around this table, was Flint water that was filtered. And it just confirms what we know scientifically, which is that if you're using a filter, if you're installing it, then Flint water at this point is drinkable. That does not, I want to repeat, negate the need for us to go ahead and replace some of these pipes, because ultimately you want a system in which you don't have to put a filter on it in order to be assured that it's safe. But as a short-term measure, this is the right thing to do. And frankly, it's going to be a lot more convenient.
So you saw Barack Obama, I think I wasn't watching, but I hope you saw, he takes this glass, puts it up to his mouth, and he doesn't even swallow any water. And then later that day or another time that day, they did it one more time. Barack Obama says this is Flint water. He doesn't drink it. This is just a prime example of how our establishment politicians forgetting about Americans. In Flint, the water crisis, that's just a terrible thing for the people of Flint. And the president comes and is trying to restore faith and inspire hope into these people, and he just does that. If I were the president, I would just down that sucker, and I think that would show courage and help people feel a little bit better about the tragedy that was the Flint water crisis. So Michael Moore shows this as an example. He goes into a lot more about how establishment candidates people were tired of establishment. Donald Trump was the opposite of establishment. The guy says whatever he wants. He's very childish. He's not presidential in any sense. And people liked it. People thought, I was on a plane. I was working on the Johnson Weld campaign, going to South Dakota, talking to people. I talked to everyone I met about Gary Johnson in 2016, doing as much as I could to spread the word, and talked to the man sitting next to me, and he said he thought that Donald Trump would be an interesting president because he thought with a reality show background, he thought it would make the White House much more transparent, that he'd have cameras in the White House and have a lot more transparency. I don't know if the White House today is that much more transparent than it was when Barack Obama resided in it. I know the president tells us what he feels and what he thinks quite a bit more than Barack Obama and prior presidents did. But those were just the thoughts of Americans and people that I ran into. So because of politicians failing the middle and the lower class for decades, this happened. Here was the scene of Donald Trump's election night party. We saw Hillary Clinton's supporters were crying. Donald Trump's supporters were having a really great time. Bill Welt's fears came true. Donald Trump became the United States president. So in Albuquerque, you can see the back of this gentleman's head. That is Gary Johnson's head. This was our election night party. The lady in blue, that is Gary Johnson's mother, and to her left, that was me. I was a Gary Johnson's advance lady and just happened to be in the shot when that picture was taken when Gary entered the room for his election night party. We knew it was going to be very difficult to win the presidency with where we were at in the campaign leading up to election night, but everybody worked really hard on that campaign, and everyone that was there in Albuquerque, New Mexico was very pleased to be there to support Gary, and we had a great celebration. So let's get into some data here. Libertarian Party, we reached a record-breaking vote total in 2016, about 4.5 million votes, well beyond where we have ever been on a presidential cycle. Great news, right? Where did we go wrong, though? I'll share my opinions. I think the 2016 campaign, the strategy was to invoke the 12th Amendment and to throw the election to the House, to cause the House of Representatives to have to choose the presidential candidate, preventing anyone from receiving enough 270 electoral votes. But unfortunately, there were too many states in the strategy to prevent to invoke the 12th Amendment. We focused on a number of states, and the states that were targeted changed often. I think the campaign got started too late. I think coming out of the nominating convention, the campaign should have been roaring and ready to go, and they were staffing up, later in the summer. Attempting ground game by the Johnson-Weld campaign, I think that was probably not a wise choice of time and resources. Ground game works really, really well when you can hire college students to go knock on doors and remind people to go and vote. It doesn't work really well when you don't have the ability to finance that. Knocking on doors is one of the worst things you can do when you're a political activist, but it's necessary, and that's why we do it. We go knock on doors, not because we like to, but because we need to. And in the 2016 election cycle, we just didn't have the manpower to have that kind of an operation. So my opinion is Libertarians got to revert to some better grassroots tactics for 2020. The Ron Paul signs from 2008, kind of got to bring that stuff back, because that's free, that gets attention, and in a ground game, knocking on doors, I just don't think that's our route. The what is Aleppo moment, I will defend Gary here. So running for president, I think, is probably the hardest thing anyone can ever do. I never want to run for president. I don't want anybody to run for president. I don't want to have a president, but this is the way things are right now, and we're trying to make it so the president has a whole lot less power in this country. So we're going to keep doing it. We're not going to stop running people for president, but it's not an easy thing to do. And Gary Johnson was going back and forth from California to New York for interviews, this and that. There's a better way I think we can do that, rather than having our candidate flip-flopping across the country. You can have them in one room and plugging into station after station after station after station. You really have to protect your candidate, because your candidate needs to have sleep. Your candidate needs to be healthy. Remember seeing Hillary Clinton falling down steps because she wasn't healthy? It's really hard. I don't know how Donald Trump did it. I suspect it's drugs or something, because he was doing rally after rally. I was getting he spent a lot of time in Florida. He was going for breakfast and for lunches and for dinners and for rallies and for fundraising events, and he was all over the place. So we got to be a little more protective of our candidate, because that's why I think we had the What is Aleppo moment. Gary was on Morning Joe, I believe, and that's a 6 a.m. show in New York, coming from California, I believe. And also having just a proper person to continually update your candidate. A lot of people learned what is Aleppo after that moment. And I heard from someone said they were speaking with somebody from Syria. I think they had an Uber driver that was Syrian, and they talked about the Aleppo moment. And the person that was Syrian said that they were very grateful that happened, because it brought a lot of attention to what was going on, the humanitarian crisis in Syria, and educated a lot of Americans who didn't otherwise know there was a massive humanitarian crisis that was happening. And so it did bring attention to that issue. Where did the 2016 campaign get things right? Well, you might be on this webinar this evening because of Gary Johnson. And so Gary Johnson's campaign brought in thousands and thousands of new supporters. We brought in 4.5, a record-breaking vote total. Gary Johnson gave people hope. Gary Johnson gave people a choice. And now there's people in our political party that are leaders, state chairs and such, because they came in after being inspired by Gary Johnson. So I overall am very proud of the 2016 campaign. I do have some places where I have some critiques, and we're just going to keep getting better. Okay, this is a presentation that we're going to be leaving tonight in a good mood. So I have a very happy ending for this. So stick with me as we continue on. Homer points out in the chat that the Johnson Well campaign raised a lot of money. That is so true. I saw a lot of it with my own eyes as I was with Governor Weld on much of the campaign, and I attended fundraisers. We raised over $10 million. There were PACs that poured in millions of dollars, record-breaking fundraising totals. So Homer, totally valid point to add in for sure. So here's the 2016 presidential election results for Governor Gary Johnson. You can see he did very well in Mexico, Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, and Maine. These states are prime fertile ground for libertarians to be in. Keep these in mind as we continue and move on. So this here is my friend Allison Foxall. Allison's in the blue. Campaign team members, friends, and family are surrounding her. Allison reached out to me and said, my state house rep is resigning. There's going to be a special election. Do you think I should run for it? And I said, absolutely. I didn't know at that time I was volunteering to help her out, but I'm so glad because it was a very good experience for me. In Florida, House District 72, the state house rep was bullied by her own political party when refusing to obey orders, so she resigned. Allison jumped in. Right after Hurricane, I think it was Hurricane Irma. Yeah, it was Hurricane Irma that came through. Yeah. Right after that, then we were collecting signatures to get her on the ballot. I was going door to door asking people, hey, my friend wants to run for office. Will you sign? We thought this was going to be a sleepy special election in Florida. You can see the election date there on the signage, February 13th, 2018. And it was in October, November that we were preparing things for this race. We thought it'd be very, very sleepy. 10% is what we were expecting to be the voter turnout because there was just one thing on the ballot when voters went to go cast their ballots. That was this election. There was a Democrat and a Republican that jumped into the race. Turns out it was no sleepy special election. The Democrats were very, very motivated after Donald Trump. This was a referendum on Donald Trump in a state house race in Florida. A solid red district flipped to blue before my very eyes while I was trying to do something about it. Allison did a really great job running for office. It was her first time, and you got to know that running for office as a first-time candidate is not easy, especially when you're running one of the most organized libertarian campaigns that a state has seen. The campaign raised over $40,000. That was to Allison. I have to give her all the kudos for that. And the final weeks of this race, we saw a robo-dial from Joe Biden that sent out to the Democrats. Corey Lewandowski, Donald Trump's campaign manager from 2016, was flown in to hold a rally for the Republican candidate. David Waggle from the Washington Post was flown down to follow the candidates. He didn't follow Allison. We later found out that 20 field canvassers were knocking on doors for the Democrat. The voter turnout ended up being 36% of the voters. We were expecting 10%. This, my friends, was the blue wave in 2018. I got to see the very early signs of it, and it drowned me and crushed my spirits because we worked our butts off. We were trying to get at least 15% in this race because we thought a special election, perfect opportunity. Let's pull national resources. I've got libertarian friends across the country that'll make phone calls and help out. People pitched in and donated all over the place, and that's what we were anticipating didn't happen. Allison received around 3% of the vote when we worked for what would have been a 15% campaign. So Blue Wave got the best of me. All right, Allison even got to participate in the televised debate. The Republican, that was the gentleman there, he's the son of Vern Buchanan, the congressman, and the female there is Margaret Good. She's an attorney on Siesta Key. Allison did a really great job, and I'm very proud of her. And, you know, the advice I'd like to pass along is that if you want to see more women, libertarian women, step up and run for office, you have to support the women that we already have. And that was the message I kept saying to libertarians is you want to see us do it, let's do it, because we really got to support our women. That way they'll inspire confidence for more women to step forward and run for public office as a Libertarian candidate. Drew Gray Miller ran for Congress in a special election not very long after Allison's election, 1 month later in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania's District 18th. I was receiving emails from the Democrats. They were emailing out about Connor Lamb every other day, raising money for this special election, because Democrats wanted to show strength in their party following the election of Donald Trump. So 2018 was their year. They had sat out, cried, wallowed, and said in 2018, we're not going to let the Donald Trump bring us down anymore. We're winning elections. So Drew Gray Miller, the Libertarian candidate, did not win, but he covered the spread. Here is the headline. He tweeted out, "We're only a few hours away from me being the most hated man in America," and The Hill picked up on that, and there's that headline right there. So that election, very, very close. Connor Lamb, the Democrat, received 49.86% of the vote. Rick Saccone received 49.53% of the vote. Drew Gray Miller more than double covered the spread. So that was a very thin margin of a win by Connor Lamb. Blue wave continued into Pennsylvania. So I was telling everyone the blue wave's happening, the blue wave's happening, and nobody was listening to me, or at least that's how I felt. I felt like I was giving everyone this warning. So then on June 26th, Libertarians were debating, is Joshua Smith or Nicholas Sarwark or someone else going to be the LNC chairman? Because we were getting ready for our national convention in New Orleans. Libertarians were very obsessed with who was going to be the chairman in the chairman's race, and this was happening on June 26th.
I don't even know. I just want to thank you all so incredibly much for this moment. This victory tonight belongs to each and every single person in this room. This room won this seat. Yours won that seat. Every person out here this evening changed America tonight. And what I want to make very, very clear is that this is not an end, this is the beginning. The message that we sent the world tonight is that it's not okay to put donors before your community. The message that we sent tonight is that improved and expanded Medicare for all, healthcare for every single person in America is what we deserve as a nation. What we proved tonight is that sometimes the deep midnight and darkness that it feels in our political environment, that there is still hope for this nation. That is what you have given every person in this country. You have given this country hope. You have given this country proof that when you knock on your neighbor's door, when you come to them with love, when you let them know that no matter your stance, you are there for them, that we can make change.
You heard her say that every person in that room changed America. And I don't think she realized the type of impact that she was going to have when taking office and the voice that she was going to have. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when she won her primary win on June 26th, she defeated a 10-term incumbent in the Democratic primary, Joe Crowley, one of the most powerful Democrats. He was the highest ranking Democrat in the United States House. She ran with 57.13% of the vote. Once she won the primary, her fate was sealed. She was definitely going to win the general due to the demographics, because there's so many Democrats in that district. So Tom Perez, the DNC chairman, said that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez represents the future of the Democratic Party. I think he eats his words now a little bit, but there was a lot of excitement surrounding her primary win. She was 29 years old, youngest woman ever elected to United States Congress. And how did she do it? We're going to get into that. I have a little bit of research that I've done, but here are her shoes. Her shoes are now on display at Cornell, and she worked. She worked really, really hard to win this race. She knocked on people's doors, and what she did was she focused on gentrifying neighborhoods in the Queens and the Bronx. She had a message of transformative politics, bringing power back to the people. So how did this happen? Well, this gentleman here with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, his name is Saikat Chakrabarty. He's a Harvard graduate with a degree in computer science and also in Wall Street, some experience there. And he's now AOC's chief of staff. He worked on the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign. When Bernie Sanders didn't get the 2016 nomination, these progressives were very upset and decided to take their knowledge and do something about it. They didn't want to help Hillary Clinton. They wanted Bernie Sanders to be the president. And so they founded an organization called Brand New Congress to oust long-term serving members of Congress, as well as the Justice Democrats. The Justice Democrats are mainly progressives that are trying to get elected to Congress. So these organizations are responsible for recruiting progressives like AOC. They did a nomination process. So after, in 2016, they called for nominations and to run candidates for office. They received over 10,000 nominations. AOC was nominated by her little brother. AOC went to Standing Rock and made friends with a lot of progressives at that point in time. And her little brother nominated his hero, his bigger sister, to run for office. And they did like an audition type thing and selecting candidates that they were going to throw their support behind. So when you look into this, it's actually quite genius the way they've been able to oust the fourth highest ranking member of Congress. And so they're Justice Democrats. Here's the two organizations, Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats. There's their logos. They are running candidates on Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, and racial justice. Remember when Larry Sharpe, he has this 7-year plan that he started giving in 2017. He did a whole lot of tours to state parties. He said in 7 years we can get a libertarian president. But what starts with electing one libertarian to Congress. Well, the progressives were right on track with what Larry Sharpe was saying, because they got AOC elected to Congress. Some other progressives were elected, but AOC has the largest megaphone. And so, yeah, Larry's spot on. Get one person elected to Congress and we can get the attention that we need to keep going. So I'd like to show you Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign ad from 2018, and let's see what you think of it.
Women like me aren't supposed to run for office. I wasn't born to a wealthy or powerful family. Mother from Puerto Rico, dad from the South Bronx. I was born in a place where your zip code determines your destiny. My name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm an educator, an organizer, a working class New Yorker. I've worked with expectant mothers, I've waited tables and led classrooms. And going into politics wasn't in the plan. But after 20 years of the same representation, we have to ask, who has New York been changing for? Every day gets harder for working families like mine to get by. The rent gets higher, healthcare covers less, and our income stays the same. It's clear that these changes haven't been for us, and we deserve a champion. It's time to fight for a New York that working families can afford. That's why I'm running for Congress. This race is about people versus money. We've got people, they've got money. It's time we acknowledge that not all Democrats are the same. That a Democrat who takes corporate money, profits off foreclosure, doesn't live here, doesn't send his kids to our schools, doesn't drink our water or breathe our air, cannot possibly represent us. What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, a federal jobs guarantee, and criminal justice reform. We can do it now. It doesn't take 100 years to do this. It takes political courage. A New York for the many is possible. It's time for one of us. Vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on June 26th.
So this ad went viral, and I shared it with my coworker, Kara Schultz, and asked her what she thought of it. And Kara and I both thought they must have spent tons of money on this ad. High production quality, the music's great, the scripting, the writing, so good. Up until you hear the words like Medicare for all, this could be a campaign ad for any political party. Any political party, up until you get to close to the very end. Morgan says he thinks it comes across as authentic. And Dean says she tells her story and it resonated with people. I mean, it really does. It makes you feel something, and it is good. And the words that she read, those were her actual words that she wrote, or so it was reported. But this video was, the approximate cost for production was $10,000. That was due to what was called a ragtag group of socialists that produced it. They followed her around and created the ad. I think it's an amazing ad. I think libertarians should look to this to see how we can replicate it. You really got to hit people in the feels. And that ad, a socialist, hit me in the feels. So I know libertarians can do it. All right, AOC. Let's keep going. Oops, don't want to watch it again. She went from Alexandria from the Bronx to Alexandria on the cover of Time magazine in April. This girl was the youngest woman ever elected to the United States Congress, and she is really a dynamo in there. Libertarians can study what happened with her campaign and how they were able to get her elected to Congress. We can replicate it. So right now in Alaska has the longest serving member of Congress in the United States Congress. He's been in there for like over 40 years. And Alaska only has one congressional representative. So I'm just saying, I think Alaska might be a really good place for libertarians to go. It's already a place where there's a lot of people who live the libertarian ideology, where they just want to be left alone. We get pretty high vote totals usually in Alaska. And I'm just saying Alaska might be a really good prime place for a congressional race in 2020 if anybody wants to do it. We can, maybe like get a member of Congress that's a libertarian. So AOC is shaping the future of politics. I think she's probably going to be one of the most influential people in the 2020 election. She has not yet endorsed a candidate. It's looking between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So let's stop talking about AOC now and move on to the results from the 2018 election. The Democrats made a net gain of 39 House seats in 2018. A 38-seat loss is the largest change of seats in the post-Watergate era, eclipsed only by the 54 seats Republicans gained in 1994 and the 63 they won in 2010. So pretty huge change in the makeup of Congress. The raw vote margin, though, is what we really need to look at here. So the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in congressional votes is slightly over 9 million. This is the largest gap between the two parties in the history of midterm elections. So the Democrats they actually blame gerrymandering for why they didn't win even more seats in 2018. But people fell into their political parties and stuck with them in 2018. So when I mentioned earlier that 2018 was a bad night for libertarians, I mean, it's because people wanted, this election was a referendum on Donald Trump. If you didn't like Donald Trump, you voted for Democrats. If you liked Donald Trump, you voted for Republicans, up and down the ticket. It just overall was a difficult year for libertarians, and we saw our voting totals suppressed because of it. It's the Trump effect. Everyone's so enraged. So 380 state legislature seats flipped from red to blue in 2018. There's over 7,000 state legislative seats in the United States. So how did Democrats get this done? Well, Donald Trump really helped them out, but there was a monumental organizing effort behind them. So in Gideon, he ran for Gideon, you're in this presentation. Stick with me for a little while. I've got your face in here. Democrats, and there's more organizations than just this one, used they kind of did a brilliant job in 2018. Swing Left, our Sister District Project, that they did was they took resources from safe blue districts to put them in red ones to flip districts from red to blue. Genius, smart, and like they did a great job. But these are organizations that if you get on their list, you can start seeing what they're sending out. I recommend that libertarians get on as many lists as possible. Create a email address specifically for signing up for political emails. You want to keep tabs on what the other organizations are doing. What are the other parties doing? What are campaigns doing? Save those emails because you can use them. I mean, you switch up the language, of course, but the way they format it, the strategies that they use, libertarians need to study this. They're winning elections. Let's figure out what they're doing and the strategies that they're using so we can do them as well. So here is a graph of the midterm election as well as the presidential election. In the midterms, there were, in 2018, 116 million votes were cast. This was a record-breaking turnout. And you recall back to November 2018, what were we hearing about? If you don't vote for Democrats, then the Republicans are going to take away your health care. If you don't vote for Republicans, then what was it that they were saying? I don't know, that Donald Trump wins or something like that, or the wall or something along those lines. So now that we've talked about how Republicans and Democrats did in 2018, let's talk about libertarians. Here's a picture of a libertarian candidate campaigning for office. So our candidates in 2018, they received unprecedented support from the Libertarian Party. Thanks to the surge of Gary Johnson's campaign in 2016, we were able to hire more staff. So we hired Kara Schultz. She is a city councilor in Burnsville, Minnesota. She's our candidate recruiting specialist. And in 2018, we had recruited 833 libertarians to run for office. 28 of them got elected on election night in 2018. A total of 53 were elected in 2018 and other times of the year. We also hired somebody else. Oh, okay. I've got more information before I get onto that. We had some defectors that defected from their old party to the Libertarian Party. So Laura Ebke, state senator in Nebraska, Caleb Dyer, Joseph Stalcott, Brandon Finney, they were all in the New Hampshire House, and also Aubrey Dunn Sr., land commissioner of New Mexico. So these individuals defected from their political party to join the Libertarian Party. Let's look and see how they did when they ran for re-election. Aubrey Dunn Sr. did not seek re-election. And then the gentleman in New Hampshire, I go through these very quickly because they're very bummed about their results, but I'm sure enough time has passed where they've moved on. And Laura Ebke, she put in a really good fight, but was not able to retain her seat, but did come very close to it. So when she ran for election with the L next to her name. So let's talk about our results in 2018, let's talk about the best results that we saw. For U.S. Senate, Gary Johnson ran and got over 15% of the vote. He broke Carla Howell's previous record of about 12% in 2000. In 2000, when Carla ran for Massachusetts Senate, she came in 1% behind the Republican and raised over $800,000. So Gary now has the title for most votes for a Libertarian in the U.S. Senate. The next highest vote total for Senate was Lucy Brenton in Indiana. She received 14.4% of the vote. And if you saw her debates, she did a wonderful job. Everyone around the country was cheering on Lucy. And so let's move on to the U.S. House. Jeffrey Blunt ran in the Texas U.S. House District 20 in a two-way race. He received the highest vote percentage of 19.4% of the vote in a two-way race. That was the highest percentage that a Libertarian received in 2018 for U.S. House. And I believe Mr. Blunt just was a paper candidate. I tried finding campaign history for him online, and I wasn't able to find much other than a Facebook page. So it just goes to show that you never know how things are going to shake out in an election. Mr. Blunt, out of all the congressional U.S. House candidates that ran, received the highest vote total. And I don't think he thought that would be the case when he decided to put his name on the ballots. So these individuals here are the only Libertarians in 2018 that received 100% of the vote. I love this. I love this. Libertarians were the only people willing to run for these local positions, giving people choice. Otherwise, the city council or county commission or something would just appoint somebody to be on the board. But instead, these Libertarians sought after low local offices, and they got 100% of the vote. How cool is that, right? So, this guy right here. This is my coworker, Apollo Pizzell. I call him our own personal Psychot Chakrabarty, the guy that's right now AOC's chief of staff. Apollo and I worked together in 2016 on the Johnson Weld campaign, and Apollo was hired by the Libertarian Party with the goal to elect Libertarians to state legislatures. So Richard Winger from California, I mentioned him earlier. He reported that there were 3 individuals elected to state legislature seats in Alaska back in the 80s. Electing a Libertarian to state legislature outright is something that hasn't happened in my lifetime that I know of. Apollo analyzed every single state legislative district in America. There's over 7,000 of them, and he looked for the most opportune areas for Libertarian candidates. He was looking for where there were high populations of independent and Libertarian voters, and in areas where Gary Johnson did well. Remember, we looked at that map earlier about the 2016 results, and we saw the western states, the plains did really well, and parts of New England. So Apollo sought out candidates in these areas on a shoestring budget and put together this slate of targeted candidates. Gideon is on with us this evening. That's him right there in the lower left-hand corner. So this was a genius move on Apollo's part. He had a very small budget and a very big task to do something that hasn't been done in my lifetime or Apollo's lifetime, electing a Libertarian to the state legislature. So he selected the state of candidates because of their district makeups, because of the candidates themselves, but also the relative proximity. He could take a field team of experienced door knockers, people that were really good at knocking on someone's door, talking to them about the candidate, talking to them about the issues, and putting it into a database. So he was able to move that field team from candidate to candidate to see how it would impact the polls and see how he could figure out who was going to be the candidates that were going to have the most attention the last few weeks of the election. Amber is also on here. Thank you guys so much for being on. Amber is in the top right of the slideshow. So there was phone banking, canvassing, daily campaign management calls. They received a lot of TLC from Apollo, and when canvassing wasn't enough to improve the numbers, they moved on to a different campaign. So up in the left top-hand corner is Bethany Valdez. Bethany was our AOC of 2018. She ran for Wyoming State House, District 55. Her opponent was the House Majority Leader and had been in the seat since 2000. Her opponent was not even in the state during the election period. He was not campaigning. Bethany is a fifth-generation Wyoming woman. She's known in her community. During her campaign, she broke her leg and continued to knock on doors between a wheelchair and crutches. She received endorsements from the majority of the Riverton City Council. That's the largest city in the district that she ran in. She received an endorsement from the county attorney, from a former mayor. The newspaper on election night called the election for Bethany. I shared it on social media. Hundreds of people shared it everywhere. We were so excited because we thought we had a record history-breaking moment within the Libertarian Party. Unfortunately, though, while the final ballots were being counted, even though the election had already been called by the newspaper, a bag of 500 absentee ballots that were not in line with the rest of the ballots and how they were being counted. They were not in line with the voter data that Apollo and his team had. Bethany ended up with 49.2% of the vote and did not win. So this was our own attempt at what the Justice Democrats did to elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It was very close to being successful. We will never know the actual results of what happened with that bag of 500 absentee ballots, but we're very, very close in this case. And regardless, all of the candidates that ran did an amazing job. And this was a pilot project that I hope continues on for many years to come, because we got this close to breaking some history. So everyone that was involved should be very proud of themselves. Bethany, I think, has a bright future ahead in politics. She's such an inspiration. I can't imagine breaking your leg, and I think she broke it really badly. It was not just a little break, it was an awful one. So this is a strong, determined woman that we should be keeping our eyes on, and I think she is still doing a lot of activism now and standing up for rights of Indigenous women. And so keep an eye on Bethany Valdez. So let's talk a little bit about some successful victories in 2018. Our biggest victory came in late. We did not get the news that Geoff Hewitt ran in a nonpartisan race for Riverside County Supervisor in California. This is a county that serves it's either 2.4 million people in the county, or he serves 2.4 million people. I'm not sure which one. But on December 6th, we got the news. All the ballots have been counted. Geoff Hewitt, the Libertarian, former mayor of Calimesa, California, won with 51.9% of the vote. He was outraised 2-1. This was our biggest victory in 2016. And when he was the mayor of Calimesa, his biggest Libertarian achievement, excuse me, was pension reform for the fire department. Once he was elected to the supervisor seat, he now has 101 fire stations in the county, and he's going to work on pension reform for the county. So this is just one example of how Libertarians can implement Libertarian solutions in their communities, is something like pension reform, moving it from a pension system to a 401k kind of system to create fewer unfunded liabilities for the public. So Geoff, who does he credit his win to? Two different people / organizations. One is his campaign manager, Boomer Shannon. Boomer is an amazing Libertarian activist. He is just the guy that he always is radiating with energy and enthusiasm, and he's a very skilled operative. Geoff Hewitt credits so much of his victory to Boomer Shannon. But he also credits it to Young American for Liberty and their win at the door operation, going and knocking on doors and getting people to go and vote for him. Remember, he won with 51.9% of the vote. That's such a close margin. And so when we talk about, oh, hey, Dan Fishman's on. When we talk about earlier, I said I didn't think in 2016 that a field operation was that useful for us and that successful. But when you go down to the local level, having that field operation to bring out the votes is very successful. I just thought that in 2016, our presidential race, trying to do field canvassing on a national scale or even on a state scale, it was just too ambitious for us at the time. So this wraps up 2018. And I want to let you know, where does the Libertarian Party stand today? But every single time that I present this information, and I've been going over this information for a year now, this information, the numbers go up every single time. We have 188 elected Libertarians. This is 20 more than what I presented over a year ago. 57 of them are in partisan offices, and 131 are in nonpartisan offices. Why could that be that there's 121% more nonpartisan than partisan? Well, it's because it's much easier for us to get elected to nonpartisan offices. When you remove the L, D, and R from next to your name and people have to vote based upon who the person is as an individual, it's so much easier for us to get through the two-party system. So I'll let you make your own deductions from this, and I will go over my final thoughts in the last slide. We have 13 individuals that are serving as mayors of towns or cities in this country. We have over 90,000 people in America can say that their mayor is a libertarian. That's some interesting information that I think you should walk away with and recall. So 2020, it's underway. Turn on the news and you're going to be looking at 2020 election coverage. We're not going to be able to get away from it, guys. It's going to be so exhausting leading up to the 2020 election. I'm already tired of seeing presidential candidate faces. We are in the post-Trump era. All rules are out the window. Anyone can become president these days. Donald Trump's greatest campaign promise was to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. Well, that's quite funny because we know that that's not happening. He ran on radical campaign promises, and so now we're seeing that the Democrats are pushing out radical campaign promises as well, thanks to Donald Trump and promising us that he's going to build a wall. So Democrats are running en masse. We have a very large field, more diverse than we've seen for presidential candidates in the past. So there's more women and minorities that are running. All right, here is some comparison, fundraising the RNC versus the DNC. Now you can see that these ebb and flow, but the Republican Party, since Donald Trump has been elected, has been able to maintain their fundraising better than the Democrats have. With the Libertarian Party, we cannot compete on the same scale. I wish we could. If we had $400 million today, we'd be putting that money to use and spending it very, very wisely. But we do not at this point in time. So keep in mind that if you want to see the Libertarian Party do better, get involved, help us out. That's the most valuable thing that you can do. But also donating, so that way we can have the resources to do all of the campaigning. When I talked about Apollo and his candidates, the only reason why we were able to hire Apollo is because we had a boost in fundraising from 2016. So keep that in mind. You want to see us do better? We can definitely do better. We can do more, but we've got to have the resources to do it. So we're not able to compete with the R's and D's on fundraising. So there is where they are with fundraising. Today, I just got this. Donald Trump announced he's running for president again. Big surprise. He did it last night in Orlando at a rally. And they announced that over 2 days, he's raised $30 million for his campaign. This here is Brad Parscale. This 6'8" man is a digital marketing genius, and he is Donald Trump's 2020 campaign manager, or at least until he's fired, because that's something Donald Trump loves to do. Brad Parscale is has a digital firm, and he's really good at ads, text messages, emails. They are fundraising. Donald Trump's spending a lot of money on Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg's pocketing a ton of money from the Trump campaign. What they're doing is they're creating a massive list. Campaigns and organizations, businesses, it's all about growing your list. They are having people come to rallies, signing up, and they're asking for small dollar donations, $1, $3, $5, putting it into competitions. I'm getting text messages every day that's saying, donate $1 to be entered into a competition to go have dinner with the president. Will you come have dinner with me from Donald Trump? And it's just like, this is what they're doing. They're asking people for small donations, but they're raising a lot of money, and they're doing a lot of frequent asks every single day. So be on the lookout for Brad Parscale as we lead to 2020. So what is Donald Trump up to? This is a picture of him here in Lima, Ohio. That is my hometown. There is a tank plant in Lima, Ohio, and Donald Trump is there. He gave a rally a few months ago at that tank plant. He is reaching out to the middle class. Lima is a town, lower middle class, and he's trying to let them know that he's not forgetting about them. I just watched a special the other day. I think it was on Monday night. Chris Matthews, Hardball on MSNBC, he was in Dayton, Ohio in Montgomery County, and he was talking to voters and did a meeting with voters and did a really rapid fire conversation. And they were made sure to mention Donald Trump campaigned 2 times in Montgomery County. Hillary Clinton, 0. And people make sure to remember that. They said it during this whole town hall. If you get a chance, watch it. It's pretty interesting. I love knowing what voters are saying, especially in swing states like Ohio. Ohio went from blue to red. Montgomery County did as well. And knowing what is it that voters care about, this is really something we can listen to and respond to, and make sure we the Libertarians have the best solutions for these voters, the most common sense and most palatable solutions that we can give them, so that way voters will trust us. So Donald Trump's campaign, his theme is going to be Keep America Great. This was trademarked in August of 2016, so we've known this for a long time now. His campaign's raised well over $130 million, and I would like for you to listen to this here from Glenn Beck. Listen to what Glenn Beck says.
The question is, in the last 30 seconds, what's the antidote? That's what I wanted to ask you.
Waking up, and I don't know if there's an antidote, but I will tell you this: if the Republicans don't win in this next election, I think we are officially at the end of the country as we know it. We may not survive even if we win, but we definitely don't if the Democrats or Republicans lose with Donald Trump.
Does that mean the re-election of Trump, and people that maybe didn't like him, now they can see he kept a lot of his promises, most of them?
Well, I know I did. I saw that he kept his promises, and I will tell you, there is no choice this time around. We must come together.
All right, Clint.
The words he said, there's no choice. This is what we're going to hear all the way up to the 2020 election. We're going to hear fear-mongering nonstop, day after day. On the other side, AOC is saying that there's 12 years left to reduce carbon emissions by 50% or we're doomed. Glenn Beck saying there's no choice in 2020. You have to vote for Donald Trump. This is a poll. It's maybe a little outdated. 41% of American voters approve of Donald Trump's work. 54% disapprove. Here's one, though, that really scares me. This really frightens me. 40% of Democrats say it's not possible for them to like and respect someone that supports Donald Trump. This is how divided our country is getting. It's getting incredibly polarized and incredibly partisan. And there's someone that I've been reading and I'm really enjoying. His name is Arthur Brooks, and he has a book called Love Your Enemies. And this is a wonderful book that I'm so interested in. And he's talking about how can Good People Save America, and I'm in the middle of it, and I highly recommend if you are interested in reading some more from him. He is the president of AEI, and that's a free enterprise organization. So moving on from Glenn Beck saying that we don't have a choice, we have to vote for Donald Trump in 2020. This here is Tom Perez. He is the DNC's chairman. Tom Perez has a very difficult job ahead of him leading up to 2020. I mean, his candidates are ripping each other apart already, and the candidates are going way far left. I mean, we're hearing them talk about radical policy positions that we've never heard from the Democratic Party before. So remember that Obama and Bill Clinton were centrist Democrats. So the Democratic Party, they are going to Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton never went to Wisconsin in 2016, and all of a sudden the Democrats found it again. They're going to Wisconsin in 2020 for their national convention. It's going to be huge. Here is the Democrats, the first debate. It's going to be broken up into 2 nights. They are going to have 10 individuals each night. The first one's going to be hosted next week by MSNBC, NBC. There's going to be 12 rounds of debates leading up to the convention. I highly encourage you to pay attention. These are really well-produced debates, and we'll see how these candidates evolve. Really good to take some mental notes. And remember, at this point in time, Donald Trump was polling at 1% in the prior election cycle, or very early on, he was polling at 1%, and then he became the president. We have no idea how things are going to shake up, who the voters are going to love, who's going to fail. So let's watch it. Let's enjoy how this process unfolds and see how this goes. But it's very important for libertarians to hear how their opposition is messaging, so we can keep tabs on it and we can tailor our message. So this is, let's see, their convention is going to be in July of 2020. Within a week, they had 4,200 volunteers sign up. The Libertarian National Convention in Orlando maybe had 2,000 people at it. So if they already had 4,200 volunteers, they're going to have a massive convention. All right, this is the first quarter fundraising. We do not have updated results. Since then, Joe Biden has came in, and I'm sure these individuals have raised a lot more money since they got involved, or since the first quarter fundraising results came in. And this is for reference. I love seeing this. There's a Twitter account that from the Washington Post that puts up every single day this information. So today we have 503 days left to go until the presidential election in 2020. You can see the history here of who was leading. At this point in time, Bush was leading in 2016, Jeb Bush. So you see how quickly things do change. So Tom Perez reported Fox News will not be hosting a debate. I think this is very cowardly, and a lot of the Rasmussen poll says 56% of people think that the DNC should allow Fox to hold a debate. Bill Maher, when he was informed that the Democrats are not going to debate on Fox, he encouraged them to grow a pair. And there's a lot of conservative commentary that thinks it's pretty ironic the Democrats will not allow Fox to hold the debate because they've held a grip on the mainstream media for 3 decades. The DNC is insulating their candidates from journalists that may expose flaws with their platform, saying that they want cheerleaders who will offer no tough questions or tough or probing questions. So the Fox News hired Donna Brazile. This was, I think, their way of trolling the DNC. Donna Brazile was Al Gore's campaign manager, and she's the person who was reported as leaking questions to Hillary Clinton in 2016 in the CNN debates, and CNN let her go. And we know this information because of the leaked Podesta emails. So that's how the truth was unveiled there. But this is all quite interesting, and I find it very trolly of Fox News, and I do laugh at it. So the organizing core, the Democrats are hiring about 1,500 people that are in college right now. They've already trained 300 of these people that are in they're in Atlanta right now doing some training. These individuals that they're hiring, it's a huge investment for the Democrats. I've read their emails. They've admitted that they hadn't even fully funded this program before doing it. And the DNC just took out a $10 million line of credit. So that tells you what kind of shape the DNC is in right now. They're spending money that they don't have, but they're banking in that they want to win the White House, and that money's going to come in later. So they're hiring about 1,500 people to go to 7 states to organize, and they're trying to take back the White House. Democrats are going to run on issues like Medicare for all, minimum wage, the Green New Deal, environmental issues. The Democrats at this point in time are not going to be holding a debate singularly on any issue, although there's a lot of support for holding a debate on climate change. So we're getting to the end, so bear with me for the last little bit of this presentation. I appreciate you all spending your evening with me and listening to me. It's one of my favorite things is being heard, so I feel so understood right now. All right, so here's some Democratic strategy for you. Swing left, the organization to help bring in resources to take red districts to blue and give them the resources that they need. This is their plan. They want the House, they want the Senate. They've already got the House, they want to keep it. They want the Senate, and they want the presidency in 2020. And the reason why they want it is because gerrymandering is going to be happening, or redistricting is going to be happening after the 2020 census. They don't want the Republicans to have control to do all of that redistricting. So this is their master plan. Let's talk about Libertarians now. We're heading to Austin, Texas in 2020, where we're going to nominate our presidential candidate. Right now, we have I want to say this very clearly because this is such a powerful statement to share. We have the best ballot access that we've ever had for any third party at this stage in the election cycle since 1914. So our 2020 ticket, right now we have ballot access in 33 states plus Washington, D.C. This is the best ballot access that any third party has had at this point in the election cycle since 1914. This is great news, but also we have to be very diligent in ensuring that we have 50 state plus DC ballot access, because to have that kind of ballot access, 50 state plus DC means that we had it in 2016, but that means your presidential ticket is so much more credible than if you're only on a certain number of states. When you tell voters that they're on the ballot in all 50 states and they're the only other ones on the ballot besides the D's and the R's, that makes us sound so much more powerful than, say, the Green Party is on 30 state ballots. So the Libertarian Party, we are the pioneers of ballot access. We have Richard Winger on our team. He's one of the premier ballot access experts in this country, and we've taken full advantage of the knowledge and resources to try to achieve that ballot access in 2016. We're on track to do it again in 2020. Really interesting statistic. The Johnson-Weld campaign performed better than the Green Party in every single state in 2016. So that's really cool. So our goals, the Libertarian Party has announced their 2019 goals, which is 200 candidates on the ballot. This is a 100% increase from 2017, the prior off-year election. We would like to have 70 Libertarians elected to public office in 2019. This would be a 46% increase over 2017. Also achieve 50 state plus DC ballot access for our 2020 presidential ticket. So those are the goals for 2019. And those have been publicly stated and shared. This is an informal poll from the LP Nationals Twitter that I think is very interesting. And it's just some very unscientific data, but we asked, if you are considering switching parties but haven't yet, Are you currently registered with one of the two old parties? So which one? And overwhelmingly, a lot of people that are Republicans that are sitting on the fence about considering switching to LP. I think this makes a lot of sense considering that a lot of Republicans aren't feeling too at home in Donald Trump's Republican Party. So they might be considering looking to us. So keep that in mind, that there's a lot of people out there looking at the Libertarian Party as potentially their new political home. So this is the Overton window. The Overton window tracks when something goes from the range of unthinkable to public policy. And we have a lot of libertarian issues that have entered the Overton window or are currently somewhere on the Overton window. So let's go through them one by one. Marriage equality. 2015 was the year that we had nationwide marriage equality. Libertarians are, of course, for marriage equality. We do not think the government should have a role in marriage, but we think that adults that love each other should be able to marry each other, and the rest America now does as well. This is something that has went from unthinkable to entering into the Overton window and becoming public policy. Cannabis. In 1990, 16% of Americans supported legalization. Now it's 61%. We're going to see cannabis taking off all across the country, from medical to recreational. And all right, next issue. Ranked choice voting. Voting alternatives is starting. Maine's Congressional District 2 has ranked choice voting. A massive effort is underway in Massachusetts for ranked choice voting. People are starting to wake up to voting alternatives, and it's also very popular with young people as well. Sex work. This is an issue I did not foresee coming into the Overton window as quickly as it is, but it is happening. Kamala Harris is for decrim of sex work, or at least legalization. A few other presidential candidates have called for decrim. So we're seeing the issue of sex work is gaining in popularity for policy purposes. DC this month, DC Council has a bill before them to decriminalize sex work, as well as, I believe, New York City. Uber, Airbnb, free market is winning in America. Americans are loving Uber. When's the last time you took a taxi? I personally love Airbnb. I'm an early Airbnb adopter. We're seeing the free market taking off. Oh, I forgot to mention something, so I'll do that right now. There is a documentary on Netflix. It is called Knock Down the House. It is a journey and behind the scenes of 4 progressive candidates running for United States House. These are the individuals with brand new Congress and Justice Democrats. If you haven't watched it, please get your Netflix subscription fired up. It's like $7 or $8.99 a month, and watch this documentary. There's a lot of things you can learn from watching it and seeing what it's like. You can go through the highs and lows of running for public office. You get to see AOC's win. You get to see some other people's their losses, and if you've been on a campaign team before and lost, you know that feeling. It's real rough when you get the results on election night. But I highly recommend watching that, studying it, and learning from it, because it'll definitely give you some insight into campaigning. One of the funny things is at the end, AOC is riding around on these scooters. So this is a free market thing right now. A lot of cities are having these scooters. You pay, you rent it. It's like there's a whole bunch of them, different kinds, and you pay a really cheap amount to ride a scooter to help you get to wherever you need to go within a few miles. AOC and her boyfriend are riding on them, and I laughed hysterically, because it's like, this is the free market, and it's the ending of this documentary, and they're advocating for socialism. But please watch that documentary, Knock Down the House. I'd love to know what you thought of it. So free market's winning. Cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are becoming popular, not just with libertarians, but so many people are really getting interested in cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is back up right now. So cryptocurrency is winning. Constitutional carry for guns. That is winning in America. We're seeing more states are implementing constitutional carry. Death with dignity, the right to choose end-of-life options. This is entering into the Overton window. We're seeing it becoming policy in many states. Shrooms. Had no idea that shrooms would be coming up anytime soon, but Denver just decriminalized shrooms, and Oakland did as well, Oakland, California. Libertarians were involved with decriminalization of shrooms. If you don't know a whole lot about shrooms, they are actually, there's some testing going on to show that they can alleviate symptoms of PTSD. So this is something very interesting. There's some podcasts out there. I think Reason Magazine has a podcast about how shrooms were decriminalized. It was a very narrow win, but shroom decriminalization in California and in Oakland and in Denver. So that's something really interesting. And the libertarians, we are for people being able to ingest what they would like with their own bodies and have bodily autonomy. So I think we're going to be seeing more drugs entering into the Overton window in the future. Occupational licensing reform. Laura Ebke, state senator in Nebraska, was able to produce a bill and get it passed in Nebraska, and the Wall Street Journal titled it model legislation for other states. Laura Ebke, power player there for the Libertarians, and occupational licensing is one of these issues that it helps so many people when you reform occupational licensing. I read something about I don't have the quote on the statistic on me right now, but 50 years ago, very few occupational licenses. Today, so many other ones. You have to jump through hurdles to get a job that requires a license. Sometimes you got to have money. Sometimes it's just impossible to get. If you have a criminal conviction, you might not be able to get a occupational license. So this occupational licensing reform is one of the best ways libertarians can help people come out of poverty, help people get jobs, help people return from prison. The war on drugs has sent a lot of people to prison. So reforming occupational licensing could help a lot of people and help America be more prosperous. Civil asset forfeiture. The Supreme Court just had a 9-0 decision to reduce and lessen the fees and fines related to civil asset forfeiture. Big libertarian victory right there. Thank you, Supreme Court. And the last issue I'm going to bring up is criminal justice reform. Here is the niece of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Her name's Alveda King. She's speaking with Donald Trump during a signing ceremony for the Criminal Justice Reform First Step Act in the Oval Office in December of 2018. So criminal justice reform, the First Step Act is going to help a lot of people that have been sent to prison, and we're going to see more successive victories coming from criminal justice reform in the future. I was able to ask the congressional representative from the Virgin Islands and ask her why. Well, I asked her what she thinks are going to be the next human rights issues that are going to be coming up, and she thinks it's going to be education. But I asked her why was there bipartisan support for criminal justice reform? And she thinks it's because there's a financial component involved, because criminal justice reform does save taxpayer dollars. Sending fewer people to prison means that taxpayers will be funding fewer prisoners and funding fewer court cases. So that's why she thinks that was a win. Also, there was celebrity components involved. Kim Ye, Kanye West, and Kim Kardashian were advocates for criminal justice reform. So we're seeing celebrities getting involved in these libertarian issues as well. So that wraps up my libertarian issues entering into the criminal justice reform. And here I have a quote for you from the New York Times. This was published very quick after our founder, David Nolan, after he passed away. The New York Times said, Mr. Nolan had no illusions that the Libertarians would ever become powerful on raw votes, but he hoped the party's participation in elections would simply expose Americans to libertarian views as a means to effect change. So I think this is a really powerful quote for us to keep remembering, because we as libertarians, we want to have that victory. When AOC was giving that speech on her primary election night, you could feel the room's energy. It felt so good to just see her have that win. And we want that win. Libertarians want to win elections so badly. But what we want more than winning elections, more than winning the White House, is we want our ideas to win. And that's what I just tried to present to you, is libertarian ideas are winning. And they're going to continue to win, because we're never going to give up, and we're not going to stop until we have liberty in our lifetime. And so I think I gave the founders a bit of a hard time for waiting until an economic issue, the wage and price controls, to found our party. But I'm really glad they eventually did, because I'm really glad we have libertarians injecting our ideas into the system. We have wonderful people running on these ideals of peace and love. And these are things that people need to hear. In 2016, we received 4.5 million votes for Gary Johnson. We have now a huge voting bloc, and you can see now the left and the right have to pander to us, because those 4.5 million votes, I told you there was 78,000 votes that created Donald Trump the president. We received 4.5 million votes. Now, the data shows that likely we were not responsible for Donald Trump, because our votes actually, libertarian voters ended up helping Hillary Clinton when you do the data configuration of that breakdown. But our voting bloc now scares the Democrats and the Republicans, and they want us. So they're pandering to us. They're letting libertarian victories take hold in America because, well, they want us to keep voting for the old parties and not to continue voting for libertarians. But we are going to continue voting for libertarians. I'm going to continue voting for libertarian candidates. So to keep our ideas in the conversation, we need to keep running. We need to keep participating in elections. We need to put forth the best libertarian candidates, and we need to be cautious with our nominees. Let's make sure to take the vetting process seriously for everything that people run for, from local office all the way to the president. We do need to take it seriously when we're running for office. All right, so this is the last slide, final points, and then it's bedtime for most of you. How do libertarians win? The first thing is we have to love each other. I recommended reading Arthur Brooks' Love Your Enemies. Libertarianism is love. Trusting other human beings is libertarianism. Trusting that we can, as a community, provide for each other. Everyone has hard times. Everyone has difficulties, but we lean on our communities to get us through them, and that is libertarianism. The Democrats, they say when we fight, we win. With libertarians, it's when we love, we win. We also have to love each other. We have to be good to each other. We have to be understanding. It's a lot of fun as a libertarian to have these philosophical conversations, to debate. Maybe we hold different arguments or see things differently, but overall, as libertarians, we need to be more understanding. And if we have disagreements, we need to have conversations that we can help people understand our own viewpoints better. If we can't understand each other as libertarians, how can voters understand us? Okay, so we have to not only love our libertarian brothers and sisters, but we have to also love our communities. So in Indiana, there's the Liberty Love Food Bank. There's libertarians that are providing for people who need food. In Mississippi, they're doing cooking classes, crock-pot classes to show people how to cook healthy meals. Obesity is an issue, food poverty is an issue, and libertarians are trying to help alleviate these issues, showing voluntary solutions without government coercion. My second point on how we win, we have to take back our communities. Libertarians have a better chance at getting elected to public office when they're running in nonpartisan local races than they do when they run for larger races. Now, running for Senate and for Congress, this is great, wonderful way to have our platform being shared. Lucy Brenton in Indiana running for U.S. Senate was in 2 televised debates. I'm so glad she was in them. And so I'm not saying don't run for these higher offices, but running local is the best way to get elected and the best way you can implement public policy changes in your own community. That's the easiest way to change your community. There's a lot of communities that have Libertarians on their city councils. There's a few cities that have majority or all Libertarian city councils. Apollo Pizzell, I talked about him. He is an elected Libertarian. Kara Schultz, elected Libertarian. And we get all these wonderful, happy stories about how they're changing their communities, and we're showing how Libertarians can govern and how Libertarians can hold public office. We've got to build a bench, because once you're elected to city council, you can run for state house, then you can run for state senate, then you can run for U.S. Congress. We got to get people elected to the local office, get the experience so they can rise and grow as a politician. So that's another way Libertarians can win. And the third way Libertarians can win is to keep doing what we're doing, because what we're doing is working. And if we keep it up, we're going to keep winning. And the politicians, the Democrats and Republicans, are going to keep giving us concessions, so that way we can keep having our ideas entering into the Overton window, and the whole country is becoming more libertarian, even if they don't know it. So this is my final conclusion. I've had a lot of fun sharing this information with you, and I greatly appreciate you hanging with me this evening. And I would love to get some follow-up questions if you thought perhaps some information, something that you thought would have been useful that I didn't include, something that you didn't know that you learned about. I would love to know that information, because I want to share this with Libertarians. So thank you guys so much for paying attention to me tonight. And let's show America that Libertarians have the most common sense, reasonable solutions for a better future for America. I think we can do it. And I think I've got some really wonderful people on my side that are going to be doing it with me. So thank you all so much, and have a nice evening.